Hey guys, today's video is the installation of RokBlokz mud flaps on our 2014 Ford Focus SE Hatchback without removing the rear tires. If you don't have a Focus, but you do have about as much space as I do between your rear tire and your fender liner, then you should be able to pull this off without removing the back tires. Now, this is in no way an override to RokBlokz's instructions. You always need to use common sense and their instructions when you're installing these, but this is just my video in the way that I did it according to their instructions, but some things may change over time. So without further ado, let's begin. First, we'll start with what comes out of the box, which actually came to me via 2-day shipping USPS, which I didn't even have to ask for. I don't know if they always do that, but it was great. It came to me really fast. And if any of you are wondering, yes, that is a Smarties candy wrapper, container, whatever you want to say, that came with it, and it was delicious. So I also didn't have to ask for that. They just gave me some candy as well. So let's open it up and see what's all inside. Now that we've got it out of the box and out of the package it all came in, you can clearly see that the front and rear hardwares are also in separate packages, which makes it easy to distinguish between the front and the rear. There's no guesswork. Which is really helpful. It really helped us out a lot. Also, you'll see that the third container, or the middle container at the top here, are the logos, the RokBlokz logos, which you put on the mud flaps before or after installation. Before is probably a little bit easier. You'll also see some instructions, a little thank you for ordering sheet, a cool looking RokBlokz vinyl decal to put on your car. And finally, underneath all of that, the mud flaps themselves. Here you can see on this zoomed in picture of one of the mud flaps that they've clearly marked if it's a front or rear mud flap and what car it was made for. So again, they are really helping us now. Not only did they have the front and rear hardware separated, they also clearly stamp what's a front mud flap and what's a rear mud flap. Alright, now that we've made it out to the garage, let's check out the tools that I use to install the RokBlokz mud flaps. The first is, I really don't even know what to call it. It's like a right-angled screwdriver with a Phillips larger than number 2 head on it. This will come in really important when installing the mud flaps in the rear of the car without removing the back tires. The second tool here is a pretty thin flathead screwdriver that we'll be using to remove the stock plastic retaining clips. The second is just a typical ratchet with a removable head. The third is a 1/4 inch socket that goes onto the ratchet, and the other two are a Phillips bit and a T30 torx bit. The torx is what you'll use to remove the rear. In the rear of the car, they don't have clips. They actually have torx bolts that are holding in the fender liner, and you got to remove those in order to install these. That's where the T30 torx comes into play. What we'll do first is we'll start with the driver's side front wheel, which you will need to turn all the way to the left in order to gain access to those retaining clips for the fender liner. Once you've got your front wheel turned out of the way, it's time to locate those 3 stock retaining clips that hold on your fender liner. This part is where you use your flathead screwdriver that's kind of thin to get underneath the retaining clip and pop it out. Make sure not to wedge. It kind of looks like I do in this video, but don't wedge your screwdriver when prying it out against your paint. You don't want to scratch anything. Mine right here, I have it actually against the fender liner, although it does look like I have it at the paint. Next, if you pull the fender liner back a little bit, you'll be able to see the mounting points where those stock retaining clips actually went through. They look like little eyelets, and they're just right behind the liner. Now that the fender liner is pulled back a little bit, get 3 of the black plastic clips that RokBlokz provides you for the front of the vehicle and place them over the eyelets or the mounting points. What you'll want to do now is grab the front driver's side mud flap from your original package. Now, if you're looking from the side of the mud flaps, they have a slight curvature, or at least mine did. They had a slight curvature already out of the box. That can tell you if it's a driver's side or passenger side, because the widest portion goes on the bottom and the arm that shoots out of that widest portion will go underneath or towards the center of a car, just like I have pictured here. You'll put the washer through the bolt and then begin to only hand thread the bolt through the plastic clips that you've installed. Now that you've gotten it hand tight, feel free to snug up the bolts using a Phillips or flathead screwdriver, whichever will fit in there. Now use common sense here, don't torque it down too tight. Again, the clips are just plastic, so keep it snug, and it needs to go against the wheel well of the car, but it doesn't need to be overly tight. Once you've got this done, take your other front flap to the other side, the passenger side of the car, and repeat the steps again. Now we're moving on to the more difficult part of the build here. We need to go to the rear of the vehicle and locate the 2 torx bolts that are used to house the fender liner in the rear of the vehicle. You're going to find out without removing the back tires, the space is kind of snug back here. So what I've done is I've made up this rig right here. I've got my ratchet with the 1/4 inch bit, and then on top inside of that bit, I've got the T30 torx bit that we'll use to remove the bolts that are inside of the fender liner. Now you can pull back the fender liner again, but you'll notice that Ford has put some metal clips this time onto the mounting positions right over the eyelets, and we'll need to remove those with the flat blade screwdriver. It's best to get a thin flat blade screwdriver, that way you can get underneath the back, lift up gently, and then push that clip out. You're going to need to replace it. Next, you'll want to take your black plastic clips and again slide them over each of the 3 mounting points. Now if you'll notice, there's only 2 mounting points towards the outside of the vehicle that are metal. The 3rd mounting point, at least on the Focus, is actually on the liner itself. There's a hole cut out of it towards the inside of the car, and that's where you're going to put your 3rd plastic black clip. Now that you've got your clips in place, it's time to install the bolts through the mud flap, which will hold it in place. And to do it, you'll take your bolt, slide 1 washer on, then stick the bolt through the mud flap, slide another washer on, and then use the rubber spacer they give you as a part of your kit to fill in the gap that goes in between the fender liner and the actual wheel well where the mud flap will rest on. This part can be kind of tricky, so it's better if you have a flashlight. You can see the lining up of the clip and make sure that the bolt actually goes through it. This is one of the parts where it would have been a lot easier to take off the wheel, but you probably break even in time once you consider the amount of time it takes to jack up the car, remove the wheel, and all of that. Get your bolts hand tight in as best as you can, and then what I did was I used that 90-degree Phillips head little tool to push them in a little bit more. I snuck around to the back side of the car, looked up, and I could tell that all of my bolts were sticking through the right spot because you can see them coming through the plastic clips as shown here in this video. Once you've got the rear lined up, go ahead and torque them down. Again, make sure not to go too hard. The clips are plastic. They do give you good support, but just make sure not to over tighten them. Once you've done that, head on to the other side of the car and repeat these steps again. Once you've got the 2 rears done, you're now done with your project. You can align them a little bit if you need to scoot one over to the left or to the right and retighten the bolts. But overall, the project isn't too bad, and it changes the look of your car pretty good. It gives you a nice rally car style look, and they're also functional to keep if you live up north, you've got snow and all sorts of nasty stuff on the road you want to keep off the back of your car. Or if you just want the cool kind of rally off-road style look, these will supply that to you. At the current time of purchase, they were only $90. They came to me in 2 days. The project was relatively painless, and these things are great. My only critique, and it's a very slight critique, just being nitpicky, is that maybe they could use black hardware next time, because the silver bolts do seem kind of to stick out. If you've turned the car, you can see them, but most people won't notice, and that'll just be something that you do yourself. But overall, the project's great. It looks good. It goes on in no time. It turns out pretty well if you do it right. So I give definitely RokBlokz an A+ for all this stuff. It looks great. I guess we'll see you on the next mod. Thanks.